Hello everyone, welcome to MK304. The purpose of this video is to step you through some of the generalities of our Week 7 application activity. And just to preface the Week 7 virtual lab, the virtual lab is also provided in this week's materials and will consist of a short tutorial that leads you through some of the BI or business analyst applications that you can also use. So you may want to refer to the virtual lab to help you with this week's application activity, or you may want to continue watching this video as I'll step you through some scenarios, just some examples. It doesn't mean that you have to do everything that I'm doing here in this video. So the purpose of the video is to show you some different things to consider inside of Business Analyst as part of the Week 7 application activity, which is spelled out here, number 2, an opportunity for you to conduct your very own analysis regarding a product, service, or maybe it's a consumer profile that you're interested in geographically examining. So essentially it's about what and who are the customers and obtaining 4 to 5 data variables. So really at a minimum for this application activity this week, I'm just asking you to examine 4 or 5 data variables, and that could include traffic count, that could include income, that could include education level, that could include a variety of spending, total population, things like that, that your virtual lab will take you through, and that I'll demo in another little scenario here tonight. But it's really up to you what you want to do for this. So you choose any 4 or 5 data variables just to put them together in a little geographic analysis that you're seeing in the virtual lab and that I might template out. So I just want to make sure that everybody is clear in watching this video that you do not need to replicate everything that I am doing in this demonstration. This is just to show you a couple of other considerations. You can certainly pick and choose things out of my video here or out of this document. So it's really up to you. And so you'll want to also, this is referred to back in the Week 7 module for the application activity as well with some of the instructions, but you'll see this in there too. So I'll do my best to keep this short. You may watch this video or not. This is just a supplemental piece for you. And what I'll do is read through each question and then I'll pause the video and then refer to our business analyst application for some of our BI work. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the purpose of what we're doing here is to examine product, service, or business or consumer profile. And with that, you might include 3 to 4 data variables. I'll do maybe a couple here for you as we examine a Dairy Queen model. The Dairy Queen model that I'm going to show you is, you don't have to follow anything like I'm doing for that. It's just to show you, here's kind of a step 1 through step, whatever for Dairy Queen to do a site analysis, site selection analysis, kind of a very minimal analysis to site selection for DQ. So we'll put some tangible parameters around that. And then you want to think about a study area. So for the purpose of your application activity, I would recommend a city. It should be large enough, maybe like census tracts. You could do zip codes. I think zip codes might be getting a little bit too large, but again, it depends on what you want to do. But cities are always good, and but you can't be too tiny, or you may not have enough of a target profile that you can work off of. So as you go through that, you'll see what I mean in some of your work. And item C is to identify a specific criteria that would relate to that product, service, or consumer profile. And as noted, I'm going to work through Dairy Queen, so I'm going to be looking at the target demographics, in other words, who visits DQ, see if we can do some site selection or expansion in that. But we're going to be working with variables such as age, income, education level, spending, total population. So age, or in this case, is an example of a variable, the big picture item, where criteria are going to be the metrics of our variable. In other words, if we list age as our variable, our criteria will be, is it greater than or equal to 50 years of age, or 25 years of age, or is it less than or equal to? So this parameter right over here, this is just an example of showing you what criteria is. So it's really the numeric backbone of what defines your variable, in this case, age. So for instance, if we talked about a variable of income, the criteria for your income, you'll want to think about, income. Are you looking for high income? And if so, what does high mean? Does that mean 40,000? Does it mean 80,000? Does it mean 120,000? So you'll want to really be able to define what this number is. And for the purpose of our activity here, it doesn't really matter if you're not sure. Just do the best that you can with that. I'm mostly interested that you're thinking about your variable, and do the best that you can your criteria. In other words, what the specific benchmarks of numeric value reference that variable. Okay. So we talked about, for your work, you might have just 4 or 5 variables of different consideration, and just a short 2 to 3 page summary, and that'll include graphics. And so if you want to pause now and work through this on your own using what you found in the virtual lab, that's fine. You want to take a look at the questions in number 33 at the bottom of the document right here, which includes some general guidelines to help you best prepare a little summary. Again, a 2 to 3 page summary with graphics. And you don't have to do every step 1 through 30 here. That's not the point. I'm just showing you that there are different considerations in here that I'm using in this little demonstration for you. So with that being said, you may pause the video or go on your own, or you may stick around and hang out with me, and I'll step you through this as briefly and succinctly as I can. So to first begin, let's go ahead and log into arcgis.com that you've been used to before, and open up your business analyst. And so I'm already there, and went in through my ArcGIS Online, and then open up my business analyst as you've done in prior weeks. And I'm going to create a new project name here called MK304 Week 7 Application Activity. So as this is creating for us, we'll let that come up, but you'll want to make sure that you log in using your St. Mary's, not your St. Mary's credentials. These will be your ESRI or your ArcGIS Online login. And typically that's going to look something like this. You'll have an underbar, not an at. So we should all be tuned into that. And then go ahead and open up your 7 and 8, open up your business analyst application. And once in there, you may be prompted to enter your credentials and create a new project, which is what I just showed you right here. So create that for your own, whatever you want to title that, that is okay. After that, we're going to click the X button, which is in the upper right-hand portion of that screen, just to close out our window. And then we can begin by accessing our Maps tab, and then our Create Maps, and then Smart Maps search here. So we're going to go to Create Maps, and then the Smart Search right here. And then we'll begin to look at our variables. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so my project has been created. I'm going to close this out. All right, I'm in my project right here. And at this point, I'm interested in going up to Create Maps. And then let's go to Smart Map Search. Okay. Now you might find during the course of the video that some of the graphics may not look 100% exactly the same, and that's okay. They're going to be very similar depending on what maybe version you're working with, but for the most part, it should be pretty fluid, pretty easy going with that. So let's go ahead and summarize some of our items here in number 13. And we talked about variables being really we'll think of those as data layers. So when we think of click on a variable up here to map the results to, this gives us, again, like income, and I went to browse by category. I mean, there's population, income, age. I mean, kind of a litany of different things in here. Tapestry information, supply, demand. I mean, pretty endless. I can't say it's endless, but it's pretty robust for the little freebie package we get here with our academic licensing. And I believe that we have about 5 variables that you can choose from. At some point, they may release that or up that, which is possible, but as of Historically, we've been typically limited to 5 variables that we can choose from. That's why I mentioned in our analysis here, we can choose, 4 to 5, and that should be good for our work for this week. So think about your product service or your target demographic that you're interested in isolating. In other words, figuring out where they are. And we're going to be thinking about macro scale rather than micro. So we're not worried about, what side of the street a business is on. We're not worried about what corner of a city it's on or what street it's on. We're not worrying about that. We're worrying about macro scales, big pictures. So I'm talking about census tracts, maybe census blocks, or if you have to, zip codes. And when we think of those macro scales, those bigger geographies, of census tracts or block groups, we're thinking about, these macro scale variables. Here are a couple of them to think about. And usually what happens in a type of a spatial analytics BI approach to this, what happens is that we start by analyzing these big picture macro level analysis. So we look at it at the census block, census tract, or even zip code level. And we conduct those macro level analytics to make sure that our profile is correctly being targeted. Then we move into a micro level analysis to start taking a look at, the size of a building lot, the number of parking spaces, so we're not worried about that. We do not want to go down to the scale right here. We're just going to examine the macro scale, the big picture, the macro scale. Okay. So whether or not we have 5 variables or more, we only need really 4 or 5 for this example. So I'm going to work for Dairy Queen. So I'm just going to show you here what I'm going to do as an example. You do not have to follow Dairy Queen. You can follow whatever it is you're interested in. And I'm going to search for some variables to figure out maybe why DQ are located where they are and see if we can find maybe a new place, but I'm mainly interested in seeing how well we can build a profile for DQ and figure out their target market for site selection, if you will. And I call this in number 14 here, reverse engineering. And what we're trying to do with this approach is for DQ, I'm going to research DQ, Dairy Queen. I want to get some intel on them. And oftentimes you may not find a lot of organizations sharing that information because of its proprietary nature or what have you. So sometimes we like to use this reverse engineering approach. In other words, we figure out where store locations are, for instance, DQ, and then we figure out why they're located where they are. What's unique about it? What are the spatial parameters? What are the demographics? What are the different proximities and relationships with maybe even competition, current stores? And then we can do fairly well at building a somewhat of a comprehensive profile of what that store consists of. In other words, why it's there. What are all the parameters or the inputs that dictate why that place was built, if you will. Okay, so the following link below here, and you might find your own link. This is one that just had worked for me in looking at a DQ of examining what are DQ site selection parameters. And you're going to see that in the next screen down here, I have in red the macro level. So these are the big picture site selection criteria. And you might not find anything out there if you're trying to replicate this DQ with another place like Cold Stone Creamery or whatever it might be. You might not find a whole lot on Cold Stone Creamery because they probably are employing geospatial analysts like we are here to make these decisions for them. But also for DQ, they have a lot of these micro parameters here too. And we don't care at this point about how much store frontage or street frontage or this could be something we could work with in terms of its proximity to malls or whatever these are here. I'll just call them malls, centers. We could do something with that with proximity, but for right now, we're going to stick with 3 main criteria: population density. So we're talking about 12,500 people within a 5-minute drive time, and average income So we're looking for demographics that have at least 45,000 or more. We're going to do make some inferences here and saying that that's probably household income. And then DQ parameters also specify traffic counts. So they like vehicles per day of at least 20,000. So we're interested in the red. That's what this is saying up here. We're interested in the big picture variables in the red box. And we're not going to worry about the smaller parameters like what's in the green here. Okay. So first off, we've defined our variable, or at least one of them is population density. We have income, which is a variable. And we have traffic count that we were able to identify up here as well. And then within a 5-minute drive time. And then another one that I'm going to add in here that wasn't specified in here. This is a variable in Business Analyst Online. That's what BAO stands for, is consumer spending on Dairy Queen. In other words, that was a large number of people. Where are they spending their money on DQ? So we'll build a handful of these variables right here, or at least 3 of them right off the top, right off the bat here. So we're going to look for population density, income, consumer spending on DQ, which isn't listed here, but I know that it's in Business Analyst. And then we'll add in the traffic count and the 5-minute drive time as we go through here. All right, so in Business Analyst, we're going to use our smart search map, and we're going to find, well, I guess it doesn't matter the order you put these in at all. We're just going to find, I think the first one for me, in here, the way I have it listed, I'm going to search a custom search for variable number 3, which was consumers at DQ locations. So right here. So let's go ahead and we'll try that out. So I'm going to go into the custom search and just look for Dairy Queen. And we're going to see if we could find a restaurant potential and then the number of people with whatever year it is. This graphic, it might be whatever, if you're looking at 2021 or 22 or 23 from here on out, that doesn't really matter. We're going to see if we can find Dairy Queen right now. So let's come back. I'm going to just cancel this here right now and see if we can find our, well, let's go into browse all variables and right up at the top. I guess we didn't need to cancel that. We'll say Dairy Queen and then enter. And here we see our restaurants or market potential. I'm going to select for the current year here, for whatever it is for you, that's okay, but purchase Dairy Queen in the last 6 months. So this is going to tell us the number of people that purchased DQ. So I'm going to say apply to this, and that's fine. And what we may want to, so these sliders now are going to help us refine our criteria. So we talked variables, and in our criteria are numeric measurements of what we want that to be, but we're going to hold off on that. Next, let's zoom in to our study area. And you could do that right off the bat too. Again, we want to focus on more of a city, and I'm going to come in somewhere around Minneapolis. Just rendering up here for me. So let's get zoomed in here a little bit more. So this might be a pretty decent study. I'm just going to look at kind of this from Minnetonka, Plymouth to Minneapolis, St. Louis Park. I'm just going to see what's going on in here. You know, I just want to see what DQ is going on. And again, all we're trying to do is see how well we can predict a DQ profile for a site selection. That's all we're doing here. So next on the list here, we wanted to go back and add, well, I added 3 variables here. You know, you might have different ones depending on what you want to do. But I'm going to go ahead and add in here the median household income. Let's do that next. I'm going to add in median household income. I'm going to say add variables right here. I'm going to come back to my categories tab. I'm going to say, what did we say there? Median household income. Yeah, median household income. Just going to put a check mark by that. Okay. So we have 2 variables in our little basket up here. Let's add another one. And we said that was population, I believe there. And we had population density. is what we were looking at from up above here. So we had population density. So population density, let's load that in there. Here's my total population. I don't know. We can run a search. Let's try density. There it is. So you might have to search under the what I did. If you miss this, you can just push rewind a little bit there. But while I was in the population tab in the upper search window, I just typed a search for density up here. So just typed density, since DQ wants a population density, and then return. And then under the key demographic, whoops, I don't want that one here. Let me clear that out. Well, I guess that's fine. That's okay. Yep. Okay, so that added our population density per square mile. So we'll apply, so we have 3 variables in our little basket up here: bought DQ, which is our consumer spending, median household income, and population density. Let's select apply. Okay. Now, once you have all your variables in here based on your study area, my study area it's approximate to what's in my graphic here. Again, it may not be exact. Don't let that be of too much of a concern here. And so we have our tools on our map over here, that you're probably familiar with already, but you can certainly use those tools on the right-hand side of your graph of your dashboard here. Zoom in or out, measure, select things, what have you. But at the stage we're at right now is we will have an opportunity to decide what our criteria are. What are the variables of our success here, the metrics of our variables. And so we have, 12,000 for our population density, 45,000 for income, and then we'll add in traffic count and our drive time coming up. Also, we talked about the scalability of this, and you should be at probably a census tract or a census block group for easy to understand data. Zip codes are pretty good too, but you can see right here, moving my mouse around the screen, you're seeing right to the right of my mouse, you'll see a block group, and that's the census identifier for this particular block group, the 27053, etc. And in that, you're seeing how many people in this block group bought Dairy Queen in the last 6 months. There's 487. The median household income is 88,000. The population density is about 1,900. So as you move your mouse or cursor around, you'll see that changing for the block groups. That's why I like using block groups or census tracts you can use as well. Census tracts are just a more granular level to this. So we can actually use our zoom out or zoom in on that. If you wanted to go to census tracts, all you'd have to do is select census tracts here, and that will zoom you out. So census tracts would be a little bit, meaning you're zooming out a bit more. So I'm just going to stay at block groups for right now. Okay, next, we're going to refine then our criteria. So the numbers defining our variables. So we're going to use those slider bars on the left hand side of our screen, of our dashboard, to fit the criteria spelled out in our specifications that we identified earlier, like population density, I think it was 12,000. Oh, here it is. Okay, population density of 12,000 and income 45,000. And then consumer spending, we do not have an exact measurable criterion for that. So we're going to set that to a large number. Where are more people spending that? That's kind of part of that target market. Let's not go to where people aren't spending DQ. Let's figure out where they are spending DQ and see if there's an opportunity within a proximity to that demographic. So, okay, let's go ahead and if you want to read ahead a little bit, you can certainly do that. I'm going to come down here and set my parameters in place similar to what you see in this red box. Now, again, my results might be a little bit different than what's shown in the graphic. And if you're also selecting DQ, yours might be too, and that's okay for the purpose of this activity. And if this were a real analysis, you could do a lot of things in here, but I think we'd also need to have a little bit more refinement, and there's another level to this that would make the data far more superior, but it's really beyond the scope of what this course is about at this point. So let's go ahead and set our sliders up in here. So right now we know that we want a median household income of at least 45,000. So I'm just going to add in there, and you want to make sure you hit enter. You know, if you type that in for 45,000 for median household income, you'll make sure you want to hit enter on the keyboard to enter that value. Now we could also bring this limit down, but DQ just said anything better or higher, rather, greater than or equal to 45,000 for household income. So I'm not going to set a parameter on the top, because if we do that, all we're doing is limiting out potential clientele in this case. And so this upper limit that you're seeing me move around in here, the blue areas that you see in the screen mean all census tract that meet all three of our variables so far. So the minute we start pulling these things down, you're seeing that our target markets dissipate quickly. So we're going to leave our median household income 45,000 and higher to whatever is the highest in our picture viewing area. In other words, in our viewing extent. So if you move your viewing extent, these numbers are going to change a little bit because your demographics are going to change in your viewing area. Next, let's select our population density of, we wanted at least 12,500. Again, make sure you select enter on your keyboard. Now that automatically took us out of a big chunk of a population there, and that's okay. You know, that's just what the parameters called for in our area. Sometimes you might have an area that's not going to meet any conditions, and that's just the way it is. Now, for those who bought DQ in the last 6 months, keep in mind when we start moving these sliders up or down, you're going to see our potential markets dissipate. So we want to be a little bit careful with that. I don't think we really need to worry about these really upper areas, because that's not maybe helping us, but let's put a little band in here around the greatest number of people, and we can maybe focus on that, or I can even pull the upper limit in a bit more. So again, this is just an example to show you, I'm going to call it elementary analytics from a spatial standpoint. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So we have all of our variables and our criteria. Our criteria are numbers defining our variables. We have those defined. Now we can add a 5-minute drive time from these areas. And you'll notice in our study area right here, I have a big cluster in this same region. Again, it might be a little different than what's actually in my graphic here, but that's okay. So we're going to add traffic count and a drive time. Now drive time, we're going to say, well, gosh, where do we want to drive from? And that's hard to know. And so we're going to say if people need to be within the 12,500 people population density, we're going to try to cluster that in the middle just for this example. So we're going to use this little pin tool, and I'll show you where that is up here. It's in the upper, depending on your version, you know, it'll be in your tool viewing window somewhere, but it'll have this little pin on it. And we're going to put this right in the center. Now you could drop pins in here all over if you wanted to do that, but just to illustrate how to use this, I'm going to click on that pin and then click right in the middle of the census tracts that I have identified in my dashboard. And if you're unhappy with where that pin is, you can left click on the pin and choose delete. And then I don't know that I'd recommend zooming in or zooming out too much at this point, but you can do that, because remember, anytime you zoom in or out, it's going to change your data, and you may have to readjust your sliders over here. So keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and drop in a pin, and then we'll add in here a drive time analysis to that, or just a visualization of that. I'm going to select my pin. I'm going to drop this, and we have a lot of places. I mean, we could drop a pin here or here. I'm going to put one kind of in general, right, maybe in the middle of this, just to see here if I can I'm just going to drop a pin in here. Okay. So this might do an auto zoom in for you. We'll have to zoom out and probably reset our parameters again, because anytime we zoom in or out, or you can see that the numbers changed over here, at least for my people who bought DQ. My other parameters didn't, but so next we'll select create site. I'm just following along right here. Let's say create site, and then we'll select drive time as shown. We'll enter our parameters of 5, 10, and 15 minutes. And ultimately, you could just use 5 minutes, and you could just put 0 and 0 in here for your minutes too. That's okay if we're just interested in only that 5-minute drive time. But just to show you that we can create different drive times from, I'll call it kind of a geometric center, approximately. Show you what that looks like. But let's drop that in here. We're going to select 5 and then 10. And then 15 minutes. And we don't, let's see, we want drive time here in minutes. So drive time, 5, 10, 15 in minutes, and then we'll select apply. Now there's infographics we can run on that and reports and everything. You could certainly do that if you would like to. I'm just going to close this. Again, if you want to edit that, I think we can edit or remove this by selecting your tools there. But I'm just going to use my cursor and drag this over a bit. And right now we're still at our census track level. So what I want to do is zoom in a little bit more. You notice that right to the right of my cursor, you see that we're at census tracks. I want to zoom in a little bit more here. I know it was so that we could see our entire drive time, but now that I'm at block groups right here, I want to come back in and make sure that we're isolating right here. So we have our bought DQ, we have our highest number of people that are purchasers of DQ. We have our median household income greater than 45,000, a population density of 12,500 people. Now we can see our little blue areas underneath here. All of these blue areas, these little blue squares in here, these are all of the census block groups that met our criteria. And so with that, if we use this 5-minute drive time, being that we're right on, we're probably at a juncture here of a number of different roads, you can see that our 5-minute drive time can extend almost down into Richfield here. And so now if we move that pin over here, it might drastically change that 5-minute drive time. So this is just an example, something that you could consider trying. We can delete this pin, we can move this, you know, and get rid of it if we want to do that. And for now, I don't know, maybe we can change the name if we wanted. I'm just going to leave this in here for the time being for the purpose of the activity. I mean, if you decide you want to delete that, you know, you certainly can do so. So the ideal piece now would say a Dairy Queen, in theory, would exist in any of these blue boxes, 5-minute drive time. Kind of surprised that it wouldn't be up in here too for a 5-minute drive time, but just the way that I-35 works, that it maybe just didn't happen to be here. But that's only if you want to use this as a variable for drive time. But according to what we have here, any of these blue boxes would be good potential areas, assuming the traffic count is greater than 20,000 vehicles per day, which we know I-35 would be. So to that end, let's go and see what we can do here to add in a historic traffic count. And the traffic count layer is not anything I would call super precise, but you know what, it's a lot of this is generic data that, you know, we can't go out there and measure traffic every single day, so it's a representation of that. But way down on the bottom of your ribbon on the right-hand side of your dashboard, you'll see these little cars here. And with that, you can select the traffic count. For us, it was greater than 20,000. And of course, we have our years. So I think there might be a slider bar in here that we can use for that. We'll try to select the most current year that we can do for that. And then you'll see the darker the circles, in this case red, that are on the graphic, those represent the greatest traffic count. So we want to try to get a higher traffic count in and around our area right here. So, okay, so the idea is that we will have something that maybe looks like this to study. Now, you don't need the traffic count either. I'm just showing you what we can do with this. So I'm going to select the add historic traffic layer. And so traffic count, we want at least 20,000. Well, I'm just going to type in here 20,000 and then make sure you select enter once again. And the years of the count, I'll bring this up here, try to make it a little more recent. And so our style, if you want to, you could change the style. So what that means is that the lighter the circles or the smaller the circles means less traffic, and the darker the color means more traffic, and the size means more too. So otherwise, the legend is provided here for you as well to give you a sense of what that is all about. Okay, so we definitely know that we have some areas in here of high traffic count. And so from a macro perspective, there could be some areas in here that we could examine. And then the next level down would be all those micro criteria, but we're not really worrying about that for this particular analysis here. So with that, you can see where the traffic count is, as well as your data variables. So what I wanted to do now is it's kind of fun to do this to see how well your analysis panned out. So if we did a good job in isolating those parameters, at least to the best that we can, let's see how well the DQ model fit our analysis. So we're going to type in a search for DQ. Again, you can kind of read these in more detail, 28 and 29 here, but we're going to select business facility search and then type in Dairy Queen. And the purpose of that is we're going to bring in all the DQs in our study area in our dashboard and see how well they matched up with our blue areas. Were they pretty close to that or not? And we'll see how that turned out to be. If they are in the areas that we've identified are very close to that, then it means that we're probably doing something pretty good. In other words, those stores are succeeding, so they're there for a reason. If they wouldn't be succeeding, they wouldn't be there. So let's go ahead and try that. So way up at the very top in your upper right-hand side, next to, this is up in your, just below your name, there'll be an address or a location. We'll just click the drop down there and then select business and facility search and then type in there DQ. Let's try that. So up on the little search panel up here, you want to, let me just close it out. You can select the icon here for search. Then we'll do the drop down and then business facilities search. Type in Dairy Queen and then enter. Now the software is going to pull in the known Dairy Queen locations for us. And I don't necessarily like this color because it conflicts with our traffic count. So let's see if we can change that. See if we can change our legend style of our Dairy Queen. So, you can mess around in here all you wish. I'm going to just edit the labels. Or maybe that is the default for that. I'm just going to push pause, see if I can get that figured out here, if that changed on us. All right, so I'm unable to, maybe you're able to figure that out on your own there too, but it must be, sometimes with our licensing, they don't always give us the free, the ability to change symbology. Sometimes they do here. We'll see. We can get to that here in the next couple steps, but from the map contents and the legend at this point, it doesn't appear that I can do that, but you might find a way to do that, and that's okay. But for now, our DQs, we can see that in orange. We're seeing a handful of them around the area here, and I'm just going to close this out. So we can see a lot of our DQs along major roadways, things like that. And we notice in some of these, they don't have a super high traffic count, but we're not too far away. There are a couple in and around our areas here but some down south here too. And when we run that business search, we're given the city, the state, obviously the zip, zip code where they are here too. Whoops. Let this render back in. So we have a few DQs pretty darn close to some of our areas right here. And that's kind of encouraging. There's at least one right there. So given just the little baseline things that we did, I'm feeling generally pretty good about that. And as we're looking at thinking about considerations, oh, here's where we could change our DQ colors right here. Just hitting next, we're going to change we'll change our symbology here to something different. Maybe a push pin and our color here or something. Well, that's okay for now. There we go. So you see all the little blue push pins out there. And you can mess around with the colors for that if you wish, but we're not too far away. We're not doing too bad. And okay, so what we have in here then is a analysis that's showing us in our study area in here. We zoom in, we can see all of our areas where DQ prefers their target markets to be. We can see which are blue areas of population density of 12,500, DQ spending, a high level of DQ spending, and then household income of $45,000 or more, along with a 5-minute drive time and high traffic count in this general area here. So we didn't do too bad of a job at this. This is pretty realistic. We're not too far off here, gang. And some things that, this is something to think about. What could have impacted the results? Keep in mind, when we were up here making our determinations for let me just open that legend up again. When we were working with our bought DQ within the last 6 months, remember when we were working with those sliders? And you might want to tinker with this too. The more we mess with those sliders, the more we're taking potential people out of our population or out of our potential target market or population area. So those are some things to think about, what could have impacted the results. And, you might have an area that you're familiar with and you might know of a store or a business or something like that. And it's wonderful to think about that. Do they make sense? And what might you try differently? We added a few more parameters in here. You could add some different ones too. And so this could be useful to understand how markets are maybe changing. Not necessarily that, hey, let's go put a DQ out right here, but instead we might be looking at our target markets and looking at the projections. Are those same people going to be living there in 10 years? Do we want to invest in a business in a particular area now? Or let's try to forecast this out in 10 to 15 years if that's possible. So those are the predictive abilities. Likewise, if you're into more of like an internet type of business or storefront, digital storefront, a physical store is not going to make sense for you. Instead, you might just be looking to track how these demographics are changing, where people are moving to, and look at, like IP target marketing through web applications and whatnot. So this is kind of step one, as I call that, for a preliminary trend analysis. Now, what we could do is go back through and change this for 2024 or 2026 or 2030. It doesn't necessarily matter what the date is, but change the income and population density and see where those areas might change. And then you can compare what we just did now versus what the future is going to be. And that's an example of a trend, like where are these markets changing? And so at the end, good job, everybody, if you're with me here yet. At the end now, all you need to do is, pick and choose some things that I showed you here in the video and or in the document, and include a lot of nice graphics. The responses to these do not need to be super lengthy or anything like that. This is just more show and tell. Tell me what you did and why you did it, and does it all make sense? Thinking about the questions below here in letter D as we work through that. So once you're done, just simply upload those in a Word document to week 7, and I'll take a peek at them. But cool graphics are really neat. So do your best to upload some really enriched graphics. And that pretty much takes us through our application activity for this week. And if anybody has any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out. I love working with this stuff, and we'll be more than happy to help you out if you're having any trouble. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great week.